Hello, welcome to House to 20. I am Justin, the DM.
I'm- And I play Phidias Mazarak, Warrior of Spring, a Drow Shaman.
And missing is Wesley, who plays Enceladus, the entrancing mystic warlock.
And my name is Joe. I play a changeling assassin known as Gurs the Immortal.
I am Jake number one. I play Celestine, the Grey Guard. He is a Warforged Paladin. And I also play Thrax Akan, Initiate of Bahamut, and he's a human monk.
And I am Jacob, and I play Rook, the Revenant Dwarf Artificer.
And also missing is Jeremiah, who plays Matthias, the Minotaur Druid. And I forget what his name is, but his moniker. But anyway, he's not here, but we'll be helping tell the story with him and without him. So we left off last time with a trip from the Demon Wastes over the Icehorn Mountains, and we made it into the Eldian Reaches, and we had just had a pretty terrible experience in the Demon Wastes, and we had lost one of our characters. Joe was playing Tam, and Tam decided he needed to go home, and so we said farewell. He stole the airship and he headed back home. So Joe, you do have some stuff written down for where we went after this, right?
Right. So along the way, as the group was traveling, they did encounter, they came upon a campsite, and in the distance, they snuck up on it, and there was some goblins there. There was some figure breathing really heavily, and they saw some kind of a figure that looked like it did not have a head. And as they snuck closer, they recognized also a centaur was there, which they did recognize the centaur. And that was the first thing that Enceladus noticed, was she did recognize this centaur. And the second thing she noticed was Tad, our former guide's head, hanging from the centaur's belt. And so this was a character known as Gorth the Merciless.
He was introduced last week, right?
Yes, exactly.
Last time we recorded. And I'll show you on the map. If we can bring the map up, I'll show you where they found everybody.
Map is live.
Map is live. They traversed the edge of the Icehorn Mountains between the Eldian Reaches and the Icehorn Mountains up in this area here, along through the Shadow Crags all the way down here, and then without really going through the Towering Wood, they cut across the river here, and in these plains right here to the north west or northeast of the Shadow Marches, that is where they came across this camp that Joe is describing.
So the group eventually tried to be sneaky, and eventually a goblin just kind of wandered over to them and looked very surprised to see them until Celestine vaporized the thing's head, and that's kind of what started the fight. Pickles, our little druid, just wanted to summon a large crocodile, which he did, and it grabbed the first thing that it touched another goblin, ripped him in half, and that started a big and brutal fight with Gorth. And Tad was now fighting against us, and Tad had been pretty seriously buffed up by something. He was looking.
I think modified is the version. He wasn't what you could consider a human anymore. He was an animated corpse, and it is fitting as he was wanted by Mordain the Fleshweaver, who is a necromancer and can bring death to life. he might have been killed and then modified and reanimated as this sort of a construct of flesh. And that's what was in front of the party here. They did have the ability to recognize who that was, but nothing more.
Although it was like, is that Tad? Tad? And so the whole night they kept referring to him as Tad. So Tad attacks. Enceladus, during the fight, somehow used her Rod of Chaos, and this deluge like started pouring and making visibility horrible, and it was just pouring rain, which I think kind of helped the party out, because eventually Tad kind of went down by Phidias, and then Gorth the Merciless eventually got his head ripped off by Pickles. Kind of appropriate. And then the floodwaters start to recede, and for some reason, Celestine, I remember this because it was one of the more gruesome moments. Celestine was not impressed that Tad had come back to life, and he was making sure that Tad would never, ever hurt anyone again.
I remember that.
And he just turned Tad into pulp. It was very graphic. In the end, Tad will no longer hurt anyone again. And it's also funny because Celestine at that point could not talk. He could only beep and boop because his voice box had been damaged somehow. So
his entire being was damaged. I think at the time that I was really inconsistent because of things going on in life, so I wasn't able to come every night, and so I had set up a list of rules that Celestine would follow so that anybody else could play Celestine. And part of his rules were to eliminate entirely and terminate anything that was threatening the nearest party member. And he would try and keep all of the party members close to him and behind him was one of the tactics that he had. So even when I was there, I still followed the rules that I set for Celestine until my availability was better, and eventually Rook fixed me.
Yeah.
And during that, the intro to that fight, actually, I skimmed over it, but Celestine wanted to go in front, but Pickles, our little goblin, also thought that they should be in front, and he would try to go in front of Celestine. And then Celestine eventually tried to grapple Pickles and shove him into the back, and Pickles turned into a swarm of little beetles and scurried in front of Celestine. And that's kind of how we got actually discovered, is these two no, I'm going to be in the front. I'm going to be in the front.
Right. I remember that.
And I think Pickles was sneaking around, and I prepared an action. I said I completely blast the next thing that comes around that corner. And that's why that goblin got vaporized.
Right. So the next session was April 23rd, 2018. Enceladus said a few touching words for Tad. And they destroyed the rest of the bodies. They continue moving on. They're moving through the swamp in the Shadow Marshes, and they're heading towards the city of Zerarashuk. How do you say it?
I'll splash it on the map if we can bring the map up.
Let me find it on the map first, and then I will pull it up.
I'm making red waves for it.
Okay. And the map is live now.
Okay. It is the capital of the Shadow Marches. And so that was the place that Orla had. Remember, Orla had contacted Enceladus through the dream space and said, "This is where I'm being held. Come and find me, because they're going to transfer me. I don't want to go away."
So as we approached this place, we were debating about who would recognize us and what the plan was. And Celestine seemed to really want to be communicating something, but he couldn't. And eventually, we figured out, can Rook, our artificer, do something to fix Celestine? And Rook kind of evaluated it and decided, yeah, actually, I can do something. So he took the night, and Rook was actually able to fix Celestine's speaking ability. And this was kind of like the start of some kind of a bond between them, I think. If you guys want to elaborate on that a little bit.
We have
I
a
did,
special bond.
yeah. I did want to mention that running a game with this many people, you do run into absentee challenges as a DM, and it makes it easier when your players say, "Hey, I'm going to be gone this week, and if we get into anything, you can play my character, but he will do these 3 different things." And I've appreciated that because it makes it a little bit easier to cover and not to slow the whole game down, even though feel like our game has lasted for absolutely ever, and we're not even halfway through. Well, we're over halfway through the levels that this game requires, but and we've been playing for a super long time. In theory, it accelerates gameplay and it allows people to be absent without missing a whole lot. At least their character not missing. Sometimes it's easy to just have them duck out and be absent in the story, and sometimes it's easy when they have put tactics together so you can, as the DM, can play their character. So anyway,
So as we approach this town, the group sees a vendor. There's a bunch of merchants outside this town, and they see a vendor selling clothes. He's a goblin. Before Pickles, he wants to go and talk to the vendor, but before he'll talk to him, he buys the entire stock of pickles. He requires pickles. It's not just a name for pickles. It was like a requirement. Phidias eventually strolls up. He talks to a bookseller, starts talking to him, asking about the history of the Mornland or history of Warforged, just kind of starting to pump him for information and chat. And at this place, they're letting in goblins, they're orcs, they're letting in bugbears, but no like humans. And not the group. So they decide Pickles turns into a swarm of bugs. He sneaks in there. Enceladus turns into bats, which is something she can do. And she actually flies inside. There's a fortress there. And when she flies inside, she actually finds Orla. Just like that. Orla's stuck in a cage. And then I have written down here 5 minutes, and I crossed it out, 10, 15, no, 20. 20 minutes of metagaming later, the group decides to do something. Create a distraction. It wasn't a firm plan. Celestine walks up to, he just walks up to this kind of shocked vendor and tries to talk to him. And he convinces him for 2 gold to go up to the gate. And a small goblin goes out to talk to the vendor, an orc. He takes the gold and shoos him away. And so as he claims the gold from Celestine and starts to leave, and this goblin kid who was there also runs up, another vendor, and he kills this orc and steals the gold that Celestine had just gave him. For the gold that Celestine gave him. And the orc's wife and kids are there, and they saw this, and they're like screaming and crying, of course, because their dad just got killed. So Phidias goes to examine the body. It's dead. And they decide to wait till nightfall and sneak in. Pickles is inside, keeping an eye on Orla. Some goblins keep coming and going. And as Pickles is watching, some goblins come in to another prisoner, and they kill this other prisoner next to Orla and burn the prisoner. And then they turn to Orla, who starts shouting for help as she knows what's about to happen, which is the same thing. Finally, at this point, Pickles alerts the group to what's about to happen. He's like waiting to like the last basic moment here. My writing, as I'm writing in this journal, is getting increasingly frantic as I realize like Orla is about to die and nobody's doing anything about it. So finally,
does your handwriting change as you like?
It does. I actually wrote here in the side notes, "OMG, guys, Orla's about to die." Because I was a bystander. I didn't have a character to play at this point. I was just writing this stuff down.
Yeah.
Anyway, they storm into the castle. Finally, I wrote down finally. and they start fighting and causing chaos. They through part of their fighting, there's this cloud of darkness that gets cast over Orla's cage, and it's completely black, which is great because then the orcs can't go in and kill her. But eventually, enemies start running into the darkness. There's fighting. We don't know if they're killing Orla or not. Celestine kind of runs in, or it just starts attacking blindly. Orla eventually appears out of the darkness, and she locks eyes on Enceladus in the midst of this fight and sees, okay, this is the first time she sees my friends are here, or at least one friend. She recognizes Orla, who's a woman at this point, fortunately. Otherwise, Enceladus might not have recognized her. But then right then the orcs grab her and start dragging her off, and there's like more fighting. This was another big battle. It lasted to the next week. Celestine, at this point, Jake had described how Celestine's attitude was pretty focused at this point, and he just is like single-minded trying to get to Orla. And it was impressive. Celestine is a tank. Rook ends up running over to Orla and joining. She mentions she has some stuff that she needs that she doesn't have there. It's in the cellar, and she thinks that there's a way to escape. So this is kind of their way out, and which is good. They had a little choice, like as they were carving their way forward, down and further in was kind of their only route, and it actually paid off because they were able to actually escape through the sweller and into the swamp and away. And they chat and catch up as they travel. And Orla also, as they chat, she lets them know that there was 4 captors, different clothes, different locations of origin. They took her to Sharn, and they took her to the swamp, and she was with her father, her dad, Murtaugh.
Yeah, the captors you're talking about are the ones that originally captured her back in the Mornland when you guys were just trying to go to the Ford Eston. And when she was captured then, she was talking about the captors that she had then. And she does describe that they were very kind to her. They just were doing a job. They were helping her, and she said that she got to know them as people on that trip, and they treated her well. So that was a bit of information that she basically said, until they handed me off to the miners guild, I was treated well.
And that was House Thrash. We know now.
Yeah.
That was House Thrash. We didn't know at the time. I don't believe we know that was House Thrash.
Right.
But I think the other big important piece of information there is we thought Murtaugh was dead, but
right.
He had faked his death at the Sending, and all that in the beginning of the story months ago. Murtaugh was not dead; he had faked his death.
That's right.
And then the other news at that point was that Nargu Rockturner, who was one of the 12, he was present in the swamp. And I don't know how Pickles saw him, but he was part of the situation. We weren't sure if he was fighting for us or with us or against us or what.
That was the first time when you guys were super, super skeptical of his involvement in this, and skeptical of the things that he had kind of encouraged you to go the path that he had kind of talked to you originally about going.
Celestine's got a bone to pick with Nargu.
He does, yeah. And it was meant to be sort of an ambiguous meeting. You guys didn't know whether he was there to influence or he was there to steer them away, or to actually make the action happen and to cause issues for you and with Orla, and with her father. So
situation I remember is it was hard to read him. And I think we were all looking for intention, and it just wasn't there.
Yeah.
So was kind of suspicious right off about any ulterior motives that he would have then. So, but I don't know if they were actually there or not.
Yeah, from the beginning of this whole game, I've been playing with the idea of ambiguity and personal motivation, and so it's hard for players sometimes who want a very cut and dry, black and white, good and evil game to accept ambiguity and to not just jump to an immediate conclusion. And I did realize after the situation that I needed to be a little bit less ambiguous and a little bit more intentional with the things that I put in your play. And I can guarantee that didn't happen very fast or very easily, but I kind of thought to myself, well, do I want him to trust Nargu, or do I want him to be true to his own motivations? And so I had to cross that path. And as we will soon see in the story, he approached again and said, "Hey, this is what I have to offer." And I felt like he was able to win them over. And I don't know why. I would love to have some feedback about that when we get there. But
Yeah.
anyway,
and that's coming up soon. And I'll
it
just
is
say this
very soon.
Even now, sometimes I'm like, are we the good guys or the bad guys? I don't know. This is what I want to do. This is what I've decided, and I don't know if it's the right thing.
It's like Star Wars, right?
That thing right there.
Yeah, it's like Star Wars. You don't know whether the rebels are doing good in the world, or whether they're destroying things, or whether the Empire is a force of order, or if it's a force of evil. You have this. There's a question. There's a question.
So in May of that year, I wasn't around, but I have some notes written about a druid circle as the group's traveling. I don't know if there's anything important that you want to mention about that.
Really, other than there's a lot of lore there in the Eldeen Reaches about the original druids and the Eldeen Reaches, which is the forest that you guys skirted on the map. You don't have to bring the map up, but the forest that you skirted along the mountains, that whole big green space to the southeast of the Demon Wastes is pretty much the origin of the druid, the class druid in this setting. And some of the original druids are all orcs, and they are called the Guardians, and they protect weak spots, which are called manifest zones, between planes. And they're specifically they took the task to guard against the Dalkir, who are the demigods of creative chaos. And so there's a whole whack of lore in that, but essentially you guys ran across some guardians who were protecting a portal that was had been closed and was a weak spot for creative chaos to spill through. And I wanted to introduce that concept because it is part of the lore that is very, very fairly key to the story that I was trying to tell at that point.
Well, also known as the gatekeepers, I think. The gatekeeper druids.
Yeah, the gatekeepers.
So one of the results of all that was that you got some goblin kids that we were in charge of, and we had these goblin kids and we didn't know what to do with. So we ended up bringing them to a village to deliver the babies to some orc moms I had written down.
Yeah.
And by this point, I was back and I was getting to play Orla at this point. I was excited.
Yes, that's right.
Because I got to play a character. And I really like playing Orla. I would play Orla right now.
Orla's my favorite character.
So she played with the kids, and it turns out that this group recruited us to go and do something, and so we fought. Not sure if it was too important, but the important detail was that they gave us something as a reward, and it was they brought out a box. Let's see, they bring out a dragon claw in a box, and upon opening the box, we recognize the same markings that are on the Rod of Chaos, and the dragon claw jumps and attaches itself to the Rod of Chaos, which Enceladus was holding.
So I want to show a little piece of an artifact that we have. At this point, we were all meeting together, and we were sort of enjoying the story and the Rod of Chaos, and Wes, whose character is the sort of the parent of the Rod of Chaos, brought this giant bone to our game night and said, "Here is the Rod of Chaos." And so I took it and I kept adding things to it as things happened. And so this claw right here is what was added to the rod, or it's not even that anyone put it on there, it's that the rod found it and the rod bound it to itself. And the rod became, like different than it was before. It was just a bone before, and now it is a bone with a giant claw at the end of it. And so the whole idea of this rod is that it is sort of collecting pieces of itself throughout the world. And this was the first major piece that attached itself to the rod, and it did it all by itself. It found it, and it attached itself. So anyway, we have an artifact that we still are hanging on to based on that.
So after that, we were continuing on to the Great Tree in the Eldeen Reaches. We had decided at this point to go consult the Great Tree. But along the way, we were camping. Out of the shadows, a figure emerges, and it's Norgu Rockturner. He had found us, and he starts talking to us about the Serani, which I think we were surprised by. But the quote I have is, Norgu tells us that they will stop at nothing to get back home. And as a nation and a race, we should help them. He tells us that they are good, and we need to help them. We decide to head to the Great Tree anyways. And we travel and we talk about wanting to talk to the Serani, have a meeting with them. So that was, I think, we weren't sure. We weren't convinced by Nargu at that point. But you had at least put out there in words that, no, the Serani are good. Or somebody thought that the Serani were good. And I think earlier, very, very early in the campaign, you had mentioned that the Serani were on this other plane and wanted to come back and wanted to destroy all of the gods. And now here again, we're hearing Norgu say they will stop at nothing. So, anything else to say about any of that?
Difficult because you have perspective on one side of the story. Now we're kind of being shown like another side of the story, maybe. Or are we being led down the primrose path? I think that was what was really hard to figure out. And I think we were struggling with, okay, are we really doing the right thing? There's no clear-cut good or evil here. So we want to do what's right, but that.
Yeah. I could probably talk for hours about why I chose to have not a clear-cut good and evil type campaign, but have a very gray campaign. One of the major ideas is that, it's unrealistic to think that everyone has, is unified in their motivation. And I appreciate it when we recognize that we all have our own motivations for our own reasons, as well as people that you may be fighting against. They have their own motivations, and they are not necessarily bad motivations. They're probably very similar motivations to yours. And so I know that's a very adult mature concept to bring into a game that's supposed to be fun and you're supposed to just punch stuff and move on. I just thought it would tell a better story than a somewhat Tolkien-esque good versus evil. There's no question in any of his books that the orcs are evil, and that the elves are sort of snooty but neutral, and the humans are fighting for their land. I mean,
and you could feel pretty good in a game about killing those orcs because they're evil, and it's something we should totally have a whole nother conversation about. Because then when I started playing in Eberron with my kids, I started playing the same way, and then I realized this is different because now, like, what kind of game do I want to play with my kids? Do I want to play a clear-cut good and evil game, or do I want to play a gray game with 11 and 12-year-olds? Anyway, that's something we can talk about a whole,
For sure.
a whole
I
different-
actually appreciate the grayness of the game because I think coming to something like this, there's always the mindset of black and white. But I think that there's a lot of value to trying to play out in this scenario where it sort of models our day to day, right? So much that's gray and unclear, and yet we're all trying to do our best with what we perceive to be right.
Yeah.
Really need to be able to model that out in the game in such that you can kind of tease at these threads a little bit more and kind of see where that thought process goes.
So it for me, it wasn't just I'm going to drive in this direction. It was definitely a back and forth. It was definitely a consideration. I also thought, well, hey, these guys are wanting to escape from real life. Why am I giving them real life? Why am I giving them something that they don't like? It's frustrating to have to try and tease out the motivations of others and to represent your own motivations. I mean, that's probably the single most frustrating thing about life. You know, like it's really hard to get at someone's motivation.
Yeah, it's going to be in here.
It's really hard to express your own motivation. And so I thought in a game where we can just kind of hang out and beat stuff up and pretend, why would I even enter that? But I thought it would make a really good story. I wanted to do it for story reasons and not for just giving you guys a bunch of easy food to eat. And you know, I've waffled several different times on whether that is the appropriate course for a game that is about escape, you know, about sort of escaping your reality. But then I thought, you know, it actually may be nice to role play out some of that difficulty and role play out some of the ambiguity we experience in real life in a somewhat non-consequential arena where you can try a tactic, you can try a negotiation skill. And I think it's taken 6 years to get you guys to start looking at people's motivations versus just they're evil, we're going to kill them, or they're good, we're going to trust them. But I feel like it creates a really good story. I feel like it creates a great place to be creative and to, I mean, and you guys might think totally differently. I'm just saying.
What it creates is a lot of time spent on my part trying to figure out what we're supposed to do, how to do it. And like I just flew to Minnesota and I spent most of the plane ride like writing down lists of like NPCs and what their motivations might be and what's motivating them and how I thought we should handle it, and like so much brain power. So thank you, and also
well,
I also know that my headphones are clearly good. The rest of me is clearly neutral, and everything about Jake is evil. Look at his headphones. Look at his mic. Look at his shirt. Black all over.
Very good. Going forward in the future, if you want me to be more black and white, I'm happy to do that. I just I've gotten less ambiguous in the storyline on some levels in some areas, and maybe more in other areas. So
To be honest, I kind of think you should do both and change it up based on maybe the flow of the story, the mood of the moment, however you perceive things are going, you know. But I'd say do both because it's going to be out of balance completely one side or the other.
For sure, yeah.
And so, you know, if there are moments that is completely gray, okay, we've got to figure that out. If there's some moments that are a little bit more cut and dry, black and white, that'll make it more interesting for those moments that are gray.
And I would say that I would say that some of those nights, remembering around that time, you know, D&D was like, okay, this is my time to kind of vent and hang out with the guys, and got a lot going on in life, and just kind of disconnect, and then immediately be thrown into this really, really ambiguous situation, and like honestly feeling really frustrated. And just being like, man, I just
yeah. And I was gonna say,
but
like,
at the end,
DM,
it was rewarding, and to know after the fact that okay, this is pretty low stakes, but when you get invested and it's like your only time to relax, you're like, wow, this is kind of intense and stressful.
Right. Fair enough.
Well, and as a DM, it's tricky because say you have something planned for the night and you think it's going to turn into a black and white combat encounter and just what all the players you think are going to want to just hack and slash and great, but then it turns out that they want to talk about it and negotiate everything, and you might end up just talking for 2 hours or 2 weeks or whatever, and it's really tricky. But it's also hard to balance, like, because what if some of your players really want to engage in negotiations and diplomacy, and other players just want to roll some dice, man, want my clickety clacks to clickety clack. So anyway,
I appreciate that perspective, because it isn't all me. The ambiguity also comes from you guys, because it's hard to pop out of real life. It's hard to not be suspicious of what's going on. It's hard not to, like, want to talk your way out of some things in certain scenarios, and also want to fight your way out of things in certain scenarios too. So I have to be ready for anything. I also have to on some level guide the story. A little bit, and so we end up with what we end up with. I do definitely recognize that some of my characters and their motivations have been fairly ambiguous and also fairly benign, and you guys have made them more than they really are, which is a whole other thing we can talk about too. It's sort of like saying, I describe this beautiful flower on the side of the road, and all of a sudden everyone thinks that this beautiful flower is the main storyline, and I go, I just described a nice scene for you, and it's not, like, it's just window dressing. It isn't the storyline. Like, what do you want? What do we want? Make it the storyline? I don't know. There's a lot
reading into it, because it's our kind of antennae go up and be like, oh, the flower is being really overly described. There must be something really important about this flower.
Yeah. So I don't want to derail, and I want to keep going with the story. But there is so much more to talk about how to create a story and how to encourage people to tell a story with you, in a way that is satisfying for everybody involved, and actually, gets deeper than just surface level. That guy's wearing a black coat, so he's evil, and I'm going to kill him.
So this kind of conversation we were talking before we started the stream is, if you guys like this kind of content and you want to know what, if you want our input, or you have questions, or you want us to talk about something, put it in the comments, and we will talk about it.
For sure.
We want to know what's interesting to you. So that's a big tangent. I was not present for some big stuff that happened next in the story, but I have written down much happened. A big fight with druids was ensuing, and a portal opened and closed. And
so I can definitely take it from here. So they have this encounter with Nargu, and that's they were sort of on the edges of the Towering Wood, not really quite into the Eldeen Reaches. The Eldeen Reaches are very they're just teeming with life and teeming with magic, and just a wonderfully, mysteriously, beautifully deep and dark forest. There's just wild magic everywhere, and I wanted them to get this sort of get the sense and the feel of that. So they, as they moved into the Eldeen Reaches, the center of the wood, the Towering Wood, is Greenheart, where the original druid is, and he has taken the form of a giant tree, this huge, huge tree that is thousands of years old, and they were the party was thinking that they would get a little bit more perspective on what exactly is going on here, and what they should do about it, by talking to the great tree. And so when they show up to, Joe's laughing for good reason, but when they show up to Greenheart, it is currently under attack. There are portals, or is a portal open, and monstrosities are pouring out of it, and all the druids around are fighting and trying to push them back. And so the party immediately decides to become engaged and continue the push. And this was one of the first battles where I had more than 10 enemies. I probably had about 30 different enemies and different waves coming through. And this was when we were working on a tabletop, so it was a lot to manage and to work through. And as Joe knows, having more than 5 to 10 enemies to have to manage on the tabletop is a lot. And it is really hard to remember which one is which and whose stats are what. And whereas all the players have a single character, you have a ton of them. So
what about 6 people playing 12 characters?
We'll get to that.
Never.
I was actually laughing because I remember when I think it was maybe a little after this fight or right before this fight, but we were talking to the tree.
Yeah, it was after that. I figured that's what you were laughing about, but that's so. Everything kind of dies down. The all the fires are put out. The portal's closed. The gatekeepers are able to shut the thing, and then all of a sudden the tree is available, and the tree is giant and big around, and there's this pathway that you have to walk up, winding around the tree to get to the heart of it to talk to the tree, and so the party makes it their way up there, and they find out really quickly that this tree is sort of on his own time scale, and he speaks incredibly slow. And not only does he speak incredibly slow, he also talks about things on a timescale that are in the hundreds to thousands of years and not the immediate need or tomorrow or a week from now. He's talking about things that are hundreds of years in the future. He is trying to recruit all of the party to be gatekeepers, to join these gatekeepers to protect against the opening portals that are happening all around the Eldine Reaches. And everyone is really frustrated because this tree was supposed to give them some information, sort of a mediating voice about their current state and who they should trust. And the tree was thinking hundreds of years in the future. No one wanted to think about that. No one wanted to understand that. And he spoke really low. It was also very frustrating to everyone listening because
it was great because it was one of those DM moments where we went expecting to get some answers and some help, and so we listened slowly for a while, and we're like, yes, and then more slow talk. Okay, and he's gonna get to the good part, and some more slow, and after like literally, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 minutes, we realized we're not getting anything from this guy. That is what we want to hear. And then mercifully at that point, the point was made and you went, okay. And he talks slowly for a while and he says this stuff. But as the players, we could actually oh gosh, thank you.
Right.
It was a great moment.
It was. Yeah, it was a fun moment, and I felt like it was genuine to the actual elder tree. Forget what his name is. It's an interesting name, but
it's in the lore, it's in the canon, and
right, it is.
Can't remember off the top of my head.
He is a giant tree.
Somebody will tell us.
Someone will tell us
in the comments.
Yes, for sure. And also, as another real, interesting, just as a caveat, I have made Eberron my world, and so I do deviate from the actual written lore, and that is perfectly fine. And I appreciate your corrections. But I can name the tree whatever I want.
True. I'm just
here. Yeah. No.
Yeah.
We can debate all you want, but it's the name that I gave it.
So at this point, it's September 3rd, 2018. We discussed the plan and what we know. We receive a message that the 12 can send an airship to meet us at Varna, to the east along Lake Galifar.
Yeah, to the northeast. So if you go from Greenheart to the east, if you can bring the map up a little bit.
Yeah, let me see. This is in the Eldine Reaches, right?
Yep, we're talking Greenheart in the very center.
Okay, let me.
Is where the big battle and the giant tree.
All right, map is up.
So the message was given that the 12 can pick them up in Varna, which is north along the north coast of Lake Galifar, and so the party would have to travel this path and make it all the way across this road here to Varna, almost on the border of Onder. So that was the message they were given. So they took a night to think about it. They took a night also to heal because there were a lot of really hurt druids after this battle, and some of the party members offered their healing skills, and Then the next morning, they started off on their way, assuming that they were headed towards Varna. And before they got to Niran, the first fork in the road by Lake Galifar, they were approached by Nargu again.
Oh, you know what? I just realized that you can't actually see Varna on the map, so I'm gonna move over a little bit there.
Okay.
There
Also,
is Varna.
yeah, Varna is right here, and this is it very much is the border. The river right here is the border between Eldine Reaches and Ondair. Anyway,
Nargi Rockturner is a wizard of the 12.
he is. Yes, he is.
And he's related to House Tharash, correct?
He is. He represents House Thrash in the 12, which doesn't necessarily mean that he is. He assumes the motivations of House Thrash. He just is a representative in the Council of the 12, the 12 mages, for House Thrash.
And House Tharash is their finders. They're good at finding stuff, which I didn't understand how this guy kept finding us, but it actually, now that I learned more about the lore, like, it makes sense that he can track us. That's what they do.
In my Eberron, all of the mages of the 12 are dragon marked, and they are like the UN. They're trying to meet together to find a way for lasting peace in Corvair, in the face of a lot of Cold War action, pretty much after the Great War. A lot of finger pointing and espionage and assassinations. They're trying to find a way for all of the houses and all of the actual regions of Corvair to work together. So they're solving small problems, but a lot of the time they get marked as being sort of bureaucratic and administrative and not action oriented. But some of the mages actually take some matters into their own hands that they have the ability to do. Nargu can find anyone anywhere. Doesn't matter who they are and where they are. His mark of his mark of House Thrash gives him the ability to track anyone and anything, find anything anywhere. So the party was realizing that he had this ability and he could find them wherever they are. And that was a little unsettling, and it was also sort of an easy way to push the storyline along on my end. So,
which was July. This was several months later that Nargu turned up. It seems like he had just turned up, 20 minutes ago, but it had been several months. And I wrote down, we asked the questions we had of him, and I don't remember what those questions are, but knowing us, they were probably the wrong dumb questions.
What is your favorite color?
What is your quest? They were questions that you sort of had about his motive. I mean, you were asking about his motivation. You were trying to figure out whether you could trust him based on your last meeting before you entered the Eldine Reaches and talked with the tree. Where he sounded like he may have been on your side, or very much sort of wanting to represent and help these this race that was trapped in another realm, and you wanted to know whether that race was worth helping, or whether they were truly the enemy, like you were told by the 12, by Usador, back when you had first met the 12 at the Citadel in Port. And so you're asking him questions about trying to figure out which way and which is the right one. So, in essence, in this meeting here, when he found you, he was saying, hey, if you travel deeper into the Gloaming, which is to the south of where you were on the map, there is a ritual happening by the Children of Winter to open one of these manifest zones to Solitude, to the plane that you are looking to travel to. So you had a fork in the road. You had a path to Varna to follow the 12 and have the 12 take you to Solitude, with sort of having to assume their mindset, their intention to figure out what was going on and potentially stop this invasion that they considered the Serrani coming through as an invasion and wanted to treat it as such. And you had Nargu, who was offering you another way of saying, will you be a diplomat? Will you find a way to make this be a diplomatic mission and not a mission of force? And you guys in that moment decided to take the diplomatic path, or at least the path that Nargu was offering.
I think
And
one of
so
the
you-
other things we had in mind was that at this point in time, the Miners Guild and the Serrani seemed to always be 5 steps ahead of us. And we, or at least I, kind of felt if we go with the 12 and we open a portal with the 12, not only is it going to take us longer because we haven't even secured the dragon shards that they require in order to do this, we're just going to get slapped in the face as soon as we go in there because they have always known what we were doing. And so we kind of figured not only do we get the chance to make the decision for ourselves what our own intentions are, we are not going to be putting ourselves in a situation where as soon as we cross that threshold, we're in a live or die situation.
Right.
I remember once we crossed the threshold, we were in a live or die situation.
Yeah, we were.
Spoiler. So, we decided to go to Solitude.
Yeah, and
September-
this
Yeah.
was very
September 17th,
very surprising to me.
2018. September
Yeah.
27th. No, September 17th, 2018. We step off the path and into the forest. It's creepy. We don't want to wander too far because we are afraid the forest will eat us.
Yeah, the gloaming
Eventually,
will.
Eventually, Nargu shows up again. He's found the Children of Winter, and they are already beginning the portal.
This is one of my favorite sessions, by the way.
Exactly. They won't be expecting us. The Children of Winter won't be expecting us. He gives us a guiding light to show the way. If the Gatekeeper Druids show up, we will have to fight them. Because the Gatekeeper Druids and the Children of Winter don't get along. One group opens portals and has a connection to Solitude. One group doesn't want portals open because they...
Right. Exactly.
So we continue on through the thick forest till the light goes out, and we hear muffled sounds. As we try to sneak up, they hear us. And there's some distracting. Orla distracts them, and we're sneaking around, and we see the portal. It's not yet ready to walk through. The guards kind of start coming back towards us, and they spread out. And there was a sense of tension, of unease, and that's when the gatekeeper guardians show up. Bum, bum, bum. And they have Vorpal blades.
Yes, they do.
First thing we noticed. And the gatekeepers show up and they say, "Stop immediately! This is an abomination!" And they start attacking.
Yeah, they're attacking the Children of Winter, who are all about opening a portal of solitude and venerating and honoring the death that comes with winter. That's their whole.
Right. So the Doom Speaker is the one opening the portal, and they hit him. He's dazed, and the portal is stalled opening, and fighting ensues. And we have 3 groups that are all fighting. The Gatekeepers and Children of Winter don't know who we are, or who we are fighting for or against.
Right. Again, the ambiguity of the 3 motivations coming together. I really enjoyed that. I thought that was great. I felt like it made a great encounter because you couldn't tell either side in the moment what your intentions were. Right.
And so as we fight the portal, it begins to open, and then the Doom Speaker, he gets hit again, and the portal stalls. The Children of Winter are attacking us all, but we are healing them. We realize this Doom Speaker needs to do his job, so they're attacking us, and we're healing them and trying to keep them alive.
Yeah.
And eventually the portal is now clear enough to see through. And through the portal, we see snow and mountains in the background. And finally, the Doom Speaker speaks some words, and the portal, it's stable and open. And during this fight, Rook has prepared an action. As soon as the portal opens, he is going to use this ability to slide, to move his teammates. and as soon as he sees that the portal is open, 3 of us get slid into the portal, just like that. And the children of winter seem really surprised that we've entered, but they keep fighting. So as Enceladus, Phidias, and Pickles run through, and there are the other 3, the children of winter pull out knives and slit their own throats, while there's a winter witch and goes and kills the Doom Speaker. And I don't remember what the winter witch was. It must have been the gatekeeper.
Yeah.
So, and that was a super intense long fight.
It's kind of an intense ending
and
to
it was,
that.
And it was really hairy and sketchy. We didn't know if it would work, but we are now in Solitude. It's cold here. The portal's gone. We are stuck. It's a one-way ticket.
Yeah. Yeah. I did not expect you guys to choose that tine in the fork in the path. It seemed like the last time I brought Nargu in to try to give you a little bit of perspective, into the Serrani, you were very skeptical of what he had to say, and you actually felt like he now was an enemy. Now I brought him in again to just give you the option. I wanted truly to give you the option of, do you want to follow the 12 or do you want to follow what Nargu is saying? And I was super surprised, based on how you had reacted to Nargu before, that you said, oh yeah, no, that's cool, that's a great idea. I was expecting you to say, be gone, we will kill you if you do not leave, and we're going to Varna. I had a whole thing planned for going to Varna, to getting back to the 12, to finding dragon shards, to going through the portal that way. That was the way that I expected you guys to go. Now I'm glad, for cinematic reasons, you decided not to, because that was a really, really fun encounter, because it was the first time you had to heal someone who you might have considered an enemy. Like, you might have considered something to fight. You had to keep them alive in order to keep the portal open, in order to get through.
Who was fighting us?
Who was fighting you, who actually was thinking of you as an enemy and wanting to stop you, and they were extremely surprised when you slid through the portal that they created. So I also really enjoyed that.
I mean, like I was saying, we were kind of thinking both of these roads seem to lead to Solitude, and despite whether we're actually going to do what Nargu says or not, we're going to end up there, and this seems like the easier path. And also, we can't really avoid him. He always knows where we are. So we're just going to go. We're going to make our own, choice. And, it ended up being awesome.
Have you met our Lord, true creator?
We do, eventually.
And it's not the last time that a group constantly showing up and being ahead of us will impact our, in my case, impulsive decisions. So
it's kind of like putting the cake on the table and expecting you not to eat it every single time, and you finally saying, all right, fine, I'll have a piece of cake. This is good, we'll just do this.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to get to that part of the story so long from now.
Have his own personal reason for being ready to just jump through, because it was gonna save him quite a hefty cost.
I didn't even think about that.
The other way around, because he's got an inheritance that he was willing to share the 12 to help open portals, and that was part of the reason why he said, let's just leave the Demon Waste, let's leave these Badlands, let's just get out of here and go find Orla. There's other options. But when the option to just jump through a portal that was opening came, that was part of where he was like, okay, here we go, like, this is what we're trying to do, let's just go.
Yeah,
okay, so
that's a really interesting
because so we needed Kyber shards. The 12 needed Kyber shards to open the portals.
Yeah, Jonathan Purple, you needed, yeah.
And they said there's shards in the demon waste, and you can go get them there. And
Absolutely.
Phidias said, great idea, let's go get the shards there. He knew, I didn't know, you didn't tell us at that point, that you had the shards in Sharn, and you could just go pick them up.
I don't have
So there's
the
some-
shards.
there's-
I have my shards. Phidias
Yeah,
has
yeah,
his
yeah.
shards. It's his inheritance.
So there's some value that Phidias has placed on, like, okay, well, what is it worth to me? Shall I travel with these people and put all our lives in jeopardy to procure more shards? Or should I just give them what I
A little bit
have?
more
And somewhere there was
complicated
a
than
line
that.
drawn. And
It's a little more complicated than that. He's not sitting on it like Scrooge McDuck. I mean, those shards are actually being put to work. Found out he has a family, and he's making sure that they are well cared for. Well, the shards are a part of that.
Spoiler.
Because, that's part of where that's going. So there's a lot of really interpersonal Phidias that hasn't come too much to the surface that he's going to continue to keep, and that and more, he's going to continue to keep rather under the cloak.
But the deciding
looking back and
line-
reviewing some of these storyline hooks, I'm like remembering, oh yeah, Phidias's motivation here was, because there are things that he just has about himself that he doesn't want to share with other people. There's like a whole private side of Phidias's life.
But then it's interesting, because then at some point it was like, it became more about Orla, because you said, hey, let's go get Orla, forget the shards. Because you told us then, I have a way that we can get the shards, let's focus on Orla. So then at that point, you decided to put your personal investment of your shards and your family ahead of
down to if Phidias cares about the people. Okay, he really does care about everyone in this group, including Orla. But he does have his own kind of side. And just like any of us, why would we just throw that into the ring to make it easier for everyone else when there's an option where we can all go work for it together to get the same thing?
Right.
And it's just basic human motivation. So that, and I'm trying to play that as well as possible.
Elf motivation.
Elf motivation.
Drow motivation.
Right. I feel like
Okay.
that part of Phidias's sort of storyline is a really sort of a neat example of how he navigated the potentials, because he had the ability, but he also realized that those dragon shards and that inheritance also had the ability to do something else, and it was a constant weighing of what was the most important thing, what helped the most people, and it changed as the circumstances changed. It's super interesting to hear that, because that was also under the surface, as Joe was saying, and none of the other party members knew what that flow was or what that decision tree was, other than Phidias.
He still is doing that, and he's going to continue to do that.
Right.
He has whole things about his background, about being the Mazarak, his family lineage, that both causing him to run away and be drawn toward the Serrani. And he is the least interested in trying to make this storyline anything about himself. He is not interested in wanting to draw attention to himself at all. So there's a lot under the surface that's really interesting, and I'm getting into a stride where I'm starting to enjoy playing Phidias, because his undercurrents run so deep that it's even a little hard to talk about, because I just don't want to share anymore.
Yeah. But it is, as we get to this further along in the recap, it is coming out more and more now. As we catch up to where we are in our actual gameplay, you will see. And I think it helped also that somebody made that shirt for Phidias that says, "I don't want to draw any special attention to myself." And since you started wearing that, it's been pretty helpful.
Well, the other all the time says asking girls out makes me nervous. So
Right. Love it.
Well, we're in Solitude. I don't know how much we want to go into it. Well, I don't know how long our stream has been going.
I think we can go further.
Okay,
Yeah, we've
so
been talking for about an hour.
okay, so 2 weeks later, on October 8th, 2018, it's titled Solitude. This episode, we are in Solitude, alone, cold, with no bearings. The DM tells us the bad news. We are cold vulnerable, and our cold and / fire weapons behave differently. There are mountains in the distance. We start walking towards the mountains, debating whether we should attract attention, camp, call for help, etc. We were lost. We build a shelter at the end of the night. During the evening, we are awoken by horrible sounds, creatures flying overhead. No one wants to see what they are, except for Orla, who I'm still playing at this point. The next day, we awake and
I
keep
will
trudging.
say Orla was very curious whenever you were playing her.
That's what I'm saying. She was more curious and less encouraging than she has normally been.
What?
Well,
That's not true. I don't know how. Yeah,
So Joe, I do remember having a conversation with you during that time, saying this is the way Orla would react, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, I guess I'll do that. And I said she would be more like a cheerleader and less like an explorer. So anyway,
which the cheerleader is, that's pretty easy for Joe in real life.
It is, yeah.
Not explorer, like, man, that's hard for Joe to not do that.
Yeah,
in all the characters I play in all my games, like, not being impulsive is so hard.
Yeah.
Okay. Where are we at here? The next day we awake and keep trudging. Orla sends up sparks to attract attention. Suddenly, question mark, because we've lost track of time at this point. We don't know how long it's been. We've just been in the cold, in the dark. Suddenly, question mark, we come upon a sheer cliff. There is a doorway with a door ajar. There are two huge hands.
Yeah.
Sticking out of the ground.
Let me show that piece of terrain really quick because I have the
huge set piece. I remember thinking, what have we done? And it's like, it seems like it happens often in this campaign. Like we talk for a while, we decide something, we think it's the right choice, or we think it's good, and then we do it, and then a few minutes later, the DM describes it, and we're like, oh, we weren't asking the right questions. We didn't think this through.
How often has that happened?
We're in solitude now?
Right. So to back up a little bit, there is a plane called Rysia or Rysia in the actual lore. I don't know. It's one of the elemental planes, and obviously it's the cold plane. I modeled Solitude after that plane. There are enemies. There is the thermal factor of being extra cold, and there are a few other key elements that I modeled Solitude after. I just named it something different because I wanted it to be something different that was my own. But it is modeled after one of the elemental planes in the lore. I don't know whether. I mean, some of the planes cross over between different, different source books and different settings. This is one that sort of is present or can be present in all settings, all the elemental planes. But anyway, that's just dumb. But
no, that's not. It's not dumb. It's relevant because it's a great example of taking published Eberron lore and taking what Keith Baker says and make it your own, and you made it partly the lore and partly your own. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, and that was I needed a place that was cold, and I needed a place that was absolutely foreboding, and Rysia was perfect. So around this time, though, in my history, my personal history, I bought a 3D printer. And I was having a lot of fun making bits of terrain. And so this was one of the first times I had made 3D printed terrain, and we were still meeting in person on a tabletop, and we were, we still had little miniature models that we're working with maps. And I made these, and it's pretty kind of hard to see. There are these really frosty, giant hands that are coming out of, some stones. and I put little icicles on them and everything. And these were the things that were sitting like this right in front of the big stone door. And everyone was like, "What in the world is going on?"
We weren't freaked out at all by that.
Well, I just had them sitting on the table when they showed up, and they all were just like, what is that? What's going on with that?
Yeah. And
was-
you said like they're to scale too, right?
Yeah,
So like
yeah,
our character, they were like the hands were like 3 times the size of our characters.
Miniatures are like this tall, and the hands are like this tall, and so you guys were like, what are those? And I told you they were made out of sort of like an obsidian, like black obsidian kind of stone, and they were frozen and some of them were broken coming down.
So as we look, Phidias notices shapes circling above. One of them swoops down and screeches at us, and we quickly decide to get around it and through the door that was ajar. Celestine moves into tanking position so we can run past, and Celadus turns into bats. Hooray! She's inconsequential and safe. Everybody is missing their attacks on this thing. And could you show us this thing? Because
Sure.
it was also
very impressive. It's a game's workshop character, but
it was scary. Like everything in this place was scary.
Yeah, that was the point. I'll go grab it. Just a second here.
Okay. Yeah. So we start attacking this thing, and Celestine says, I can tell why they want to come back to Eberron. This place sucks.
Yeah.
That's our Warforged saying that. Oh my gosh.
Okay, so these giant flying flappy things, it's really hard to see because my light is really washing it out, but they're a Games Workshop figure called a Screamer, and Doug had bought me some Screamers for, I think it was my birthday or for Christmas or something like that, and I thought these would be perfect to bring into the game. They're kind of like these flying manta rays with giant mouths in the end of them, and anyway, there were 3 of them at one point on the table, and they could fly really fast, and they could attack multiple enemies or multiple things as they went. So they would move 10 squares, and they would attack everything that they went by, and everyone was going, "Oh, we've never seen anything like this before! It's killing us, destroying us."
Massive amounts of damage to all of us, and we couldn't hit any of them.
Right.
I think somebody dazed one of them maybe once.
Yes.
So we're trying to move forward and past the creatures. And so Celestine, of course, moves backwards towards the enemy. No! He then uses everything he has to attack the creature and whiffs on everything. And Celestine goes, run.
We need to get out of here.
Yeah. And Celadus runs. Rook uses like this slick concussion to like move us all forward. Pretty much everybody's using all their stuff to escape at this point. So of course at this point the creature calls down 2 more creatures to attack us. So that's how there was 3.
Yeah.
Celestine is a freaking tank and has taken all the abuse and is still at full HP. Rook, Phidias, and Celestin get inside the doors and throw healing at Orla, who is hurting, but she and Celestine run with encouragement into the door. Phew. So we like duck into this place. The creatures circle back up into the air like the carrion they are, and we find ourselves in a low light foyer of smooth black glass with blue luminescence.
Yeah, the floor looked like the stars, and the walls were smooth obsidian like glass. One aside, that was one of the first encounters that I had ever put something in front of you that you could not hit. I knew your stats, I knew what you could do, and I put something out there that you only had the choice to run, and it took you a while to figure out that you needed to run, but you actually figured it out. So.
Yeah, I felt like It was the right thing to do to tell everyone like we need to get the hell out of here.
Yeah.
Right, and
It was
that was my desire. That was the result that I was hoping for.
And
to make it scary enough and obvious enough that we will get nowhere with these things. So just run.
Yeah.
That's one tactic to actually corral the players to where you want them to go.
It is. I think I just wanted to introduce the concept that not everything, like I'm not going to scale everything to the point where you're just like, oh, this is rightly matched, and it's just going to be a long encounter. I was actually at that point sort of getting. I wanted to get creative with the encounters because it was a little bit boring for me to try to have to scale an encounter to a group that was ever changing in size and also make it something that they were engaged with rather than just pressing a button and eventually it will die. It needed to be an encounter where you had to think outside the box, and outside the box was run at this point.
Yep.
No one died.
No one died. So let's see. There is, I think, a week here or two when I was gone, and I don't have good notes on it. November 12th. I just have captured and Orla taken away and put in jail.
Yep.
And then next, we're in jail. But I think there's something else.
There is,
some
yeah,
big stuff, significant stuff that happened.
huge stuff. I think I don't know. Celestine could probably speak to what happened in this chamber or this underground chamber.
Well, if I recall, we found some, and I wish that Jake too was here, because he had some stuff to do with this. We found some different pedestals and artifacts inside of this cave. And one of the other things too is that we found out that we were also not alone in this cave. And there was a big demon in one of the rooms that we kind of decided like, okay, there's a demon in there. And I think did we decide to engage that demon? I think that's what happened.
He was kneeling and sort of seemed like he was like meditating or something, like disengaged from awareness.
I'm trying to remember
Attention to us.
at what point Jake or Rook decided to take a drink out of the pool that we found.
Oh yeah, that's it. I don't remember when that happened. You're right.
Well, I think there's. Did you encounter this demon twice? In this room twice? Because
yeah, I don't want to spoil how the demon.
So I think that there wasn't.
Yeah. So I think there's some other stuff, and we went back to this place.
We ran into some carrion or some flesh things, just like some scavengers, and the rod of chaos ended up getting set off while we were in that encounter.
I think that's later though, because that's in January, and Gers was around by then.
It was with you guys, okay.
So I think that that time that you're talking about that's relevant to Celestine happens after that.
Okay. So
let me check really quick our battle log, because I have all the encounters we've ever done.
Okay, yeah. So November 12th, it says captured and Orla taken away, put in jail.
Yeah.
And I think I would have written more down about the other stuff.
Right. Let's see here.
I think that we just rested up and explored a little bit the first time we went in that cave.
Okay.
So you explored and you found a single entity that actually would duplicate itself, and the actual monster in D&D lore is a bearbalang, or yeah, it's a bearbalang, and they actually make copies of themselves, and so you ended up fighting a whole bunch of enemies that were all of them were, but one were copies, and you eventually beat.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
The one thing, and you tried to communicate with him, and he was sort of really childlike and couldn't really didn't really communicate very well with you.
Huh.
Joe, I don't
Foreshadowing.
think you were there for that.
I wasn't there for that, but there is a little bit of foreshadowing there, maybe.
Right.
So how did you guys get captured then?
They headed towards, like, they were able to find out information, and they headed out of the cave toward, like, a direction, and were immediately captured. Like, they were immediately surrounded by these little blue elf men, and then they were taken.
Little blue elf men. Is there any? What were the blue elf men wearing, etc.?
Yeah, they were wearing gray armor, and they looked like the Serani that was captured.
Okay, so they were. We can just say they were captured by the Serani.
They were captured by the Serani. You guys
And this is the first time really we had ever encountered the Serani.
Mm-hmm.
Right, exactly.
Except for Orla.
Yeah, and except for the one Serani that the 12 had in their dungeon, but didn't he die, or they just had his weapons? Yeah. Anyway,
I'm trying to remember if the Serani had any immediate reactions to the sigils on Celestine, or if that's later on.
I don't remember. That's a good question. I don't think that they did. They also didn't have an immediate reaction to Phidias, but I think he was wearing his disguise at that point. Because Phidias is a drow, and they are drow-ish. They are a slightly different color than drow, but they are drow-ish.
Nice. They would recognize their. I would imagine.
They're what? You kind of cut out there for me. They're what?
They're the relatives.
Okay.
But what happened immediately was the thing that you noticed first was you tried to communicate with them, and how did they communicate back to you?
Actually, I don't remember.
Strangely.
They communicated in metaphors.
Right.
Right.
Well,
they have a whole language of metaphors.
Yes, and Orla was trying to. She at this point was sort of catching on and trying to figure out translation, because she is a House Civis, dragon marked at this point, able to understand multiple languages and able to translate. And she was working on trying to figure out in the field what they were saying, and she could
there
come
was
up
one
with
metaphor they kept using, or we kept using over and over again.
Yes. Do you remember what it was?
I think I have it written. I have it written down here at some point.
Like something in the pit.
Yeah, I don't exactly remember what name it was.
Well,
but
we'll see if we get to it here, if it's written down. Because the next week, then I was back in Solidus. This is November 19th, 2018. And Solidus, Pickles, Rook, and Phidias are imprisoned along with a man from Eberron.
Well, just before that, though, the Serani, on the way back to the prison, they wanted to test the character's fighting ability, and so they took them to this frozen pond, and they brought out a giant that was weakened, and they sort of ordered them to fight the giant, and they ended up.
I recall, we absolutely dispatched that guy.
This was after.
Is that later?
Yep.
Okay.
Because Gurs was there, cautious.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So they pretty much captured him, and they put him in here according to the notes. And then there was a man from Eberron. So they get a little bit more information, because he says that he has been in prison for 32 days and 4 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And his name is Erexius Darkshadow.
Yep.
The Falarian. And he is a member of the 12 from House Falarian. Mm-hmm. He took over right after Mordain fell.
Yep.
And he volunteered for this mission. Jaunt sent him, Jaunt the Purple.
Yep.
And he tells them that time is different between the planes. And so 28 days in Eberron is 1 day in Solitude.
Yep.
So 28 days in Eberron is 1 day in Solitude. We've already been in Solitude
for 3 days, 3.5 days at that point.
A few days at this point. And so it's already been several months in Eberron. And I don't think we quite understood the implications of that quite yet, but it is a big deal. 6 days ago, another showed up, but they took him away. He was a half-orc from the Assassin's Guild. And he says they strapped a bomb on his back and sent him to his death. That's what this this wizard was told, or that's the information he has. And he says the 12 were deceptive. And I think that just means what they told the half-orc, what they told Gers. They were deceptive in it. So he gives, Erexius gives us information about the Serani, that they have been here only about 1,300 years, 1,339 years, which is 38,000 something years in Eberron time.
It's almost 40,000 years. Yeah.
Almost 40,000 years. Given the long life of elves, it's only been like a couple of generations, like 2 generations, basically, that have been gone. From the time they left Eberron till now in Solitude, it's only been like 2 generations of elves. Mm-hmm. So even though it's been 40,000 years for us, this is like an ancient race, basically. Yes. It has not been that long for them.
Right.
And they speak in metaphoric language, and it's a code to keep the giants out. That's what I have written down.
That was his speculation.
Okay.
He was making the leap to say it seemed like they were trying to speak in code.
So, and I also have written some dragons also fell in. So he must have given us some information at this point about the origin of the Serani, the giants, and the dragons here in this plane. But I don't remember what information it was that he gave us.
It was supposed to be a little bit vague. So he basically said, "Hey, well, I read some stuff, and from what I read, this might be the event that happened." And he talked a little bit about, well, in Zendrick, there used to be, a long time ago, there it was filled with giants, and they had slaves that were elves, and they worked closely with the dragons and dragon magic. And it looks like that is the time frame when this race and the giants and dragons in this realm at this time were caught. And he sort of made that leap and said, this seems like, time wise, this seems like it might occur. They might be concurrent, and he wasn't very definitive about it.
Cool. He lets us know the Serani are treating him well, but he can't talk their metaphor. And Phidias explains to Erexius that we were working with the 12, but came a bit hastily. ... Phidias sends his scorpion out to explore the prison, and he finds closed doors and Celestine, who had been taken away from us, restrained in a private cell across from a half-orc, which Celestine tries to communicate, but the half-orc seems quiet. And that was me. I wasn't playing Orla anymore. Right. I was now playing this half-orc.
Orla was taken away. I remember she was put in a cage at the bottom of a dragon and flown somewhere else.
I wasn't there for that, but I know that Orla was not there.
She was.
I was not Orla.
She did not go to the prison with the rest of you. She very obviously was taken in a different direction, and you guys didn't know where at that point.
Okay.
So that's why you weren't.
So for those listeners who are tracking the dates, it was like November or December of 2017 that my previous character Tam left the group, and now it's November 19th, 2018. So I've been without character for almost a year, and this was the first time I was getting to play this character that I had planned and talked about with Justin, and we had, I had created this backstory and all this stuff, and then I just sat on it for months and months till the time was right.
And that has been a factor when I need to introduce a new character, a new player character. It needs to be right. It can't be it can't be forced. It needs to be part of the story, in my opinion. And sometimes it happens the next day. and sometimes it happens next year. But who knows? Because it has to be a part of the story. So there are other people that have been introduced very quickly, and other people that have been introduced as Joe's character very slowly because the story needed. You did play, so you played Orla.
I played Orla.
You
Yeah.
had something to do.
Excuse me.
Yeah, and I was happy.
What would have
And-
been interesting is to see how you would have introduced Gers.
Mhm.
We had not gone through the portal, but we had gone to that city.
Yeah, no, I mean that's a great idea. It would have been fairly easy. It actually probably would have been easier than making him a martyr.
Hmm.
But it would have happened. It might have happened quite a bit earlier than it did. But yeah,
Be careful if you're playing in a game with Justin and your character looks like it's about to die, and you think, well, I haven't, because it's happened several times where I'm like, oh, my character's going to die. And you get to that point where you're like, what will my next character be? And you start daydreaming about races and classes, and I got a great idea for my next character after this one dies in a few turns. But it's not that simple. Your character might die, yes, that's true. It might die, but it may not be
Right.
soon before your next guy gets in the game. So fight hard. Make
I mean,
those death saving throws.
right. My order of importance is community of players first, story very close second, and then everything else kind of falls by the wayside. So
And to
if you
be
have
fair, yep, we
if
were
you-
in very good communication, and I was all on board with it. So
yeah, and if you have your heart set on something, you have to wait for it to naturally happen. So we got introduced to Gers, and he kind of said, "Hey, so I had an arcane bomb strapped to my back, and I was shoved through the portal." And he did some name dropping, like Usador and a couple other of the 12. And so the party now sort of feels a little bit, torn between the motivations of the 12, whether they'd send someone here, and like two people at least that you had already met to come and be trapped, or to die, or to blow something up, without really any choice in the matter. How did you feel at that point, Joe, being introduced as a suicide bomber?
well, at that point, I had figured I had been in there for a while, and now these strange people showed up and were asking me questions. And so when Celestine said, "So, who are you?" and the first thing that popped into my mind was, "I'm cautious." Thinking, like, I'm being cautious. I'm not going to tell you who I am. I don't know you at all. But Celestine went, "Cautious. Okay, that's your name." And that's what I went by for months and months and months. Cautious. I never told him my name. Cautious seemed to work well.
Well,
Yeah.
I asked you what your real name was, and you were hesitant to even share. So we're like, okay, fine, you're cautious. And I was like, it's fine by us.
Just kind of stuck.
It was totally unintentional, and it was perfect. So, and yeah, like, as I kind of felt like a real person might feel if you thought you were going to do one thing, and then they put a bomb on your back and send you in to die. Like, that is not what I signed up for. It's not what Joe the player signed his character up for. And so there was a very real feeling of like, what? Betrayal? What? Hang on. I was frustrated. So I was frustrated with the 12. Very
It fits with your character's profession, though.
Mhm.
well. It fits with. I think it fits with my character's his righteous indignation, because my character feels like he is a highly trained, valuable weapon and worth a lot more alive. And like, you send me in as special forces and I'm going to do some stuff. Don't just put a bomb on me and send me through. Like, you definitely underutilize me here, stupid 12. You don't know nothing, 12.
Well, it's okay. But I'd also say that coming out recently in the story, and we will for sure get to this, is Gers' skepticism of his assassin order, because on some level they were the progenitors of being hired to the 12. Like they're your handlers. They sent you to on this mission on some level.
Yeah.
And so on a lot of levels, they're the puppet master behind you being sent, with a bomb strapped to your back.
So I trusted
King
my
is,
bosses.
the
Hey,
host.
go to. They said go do this job. Go do what the 12 tell you. And I assumed that they did not know what the 12 were going to do.
Right.
But now maybe they did know. Maybe they're trying to get rid of me. I don't know.
Who knows? Maybe you've avoided their attempts to get rid of you at this point. But.
It started to make
Like
me
how
very angry.
We're doing some role play via
We're like-
recap now.
That was kind of low status, Those guys are short-lived, and it's all for queen and country. Highly trained, yeah. Lethal weapons, absolutely. Expendable, absolutely.
I'll show you expendable.
Says James Bond. Yes.
Sounds like he needs his martini shaken, not stirred. So, do you guys remember how you got out of that prison? For me, I do remember that that this little goblin druid that could turn into like inch-high bugs couldn't be kept in a cage. He could not be detained. And he got out and got everywhere. He went through grills and vents and inspected everything, and just went everywhere. I didn't really anticipate that. And he turned into a swarm of bugs and just kind of went wherever he wanted to.
Yeah, he went exploring. He was the one who got Celestine and Cautious talking. And at that point, it was kind of nice because that those two were together. I don't know if you planned it that way, but Celestine, the Warforged, had perfect recollection of everything, and he said, "Here's everything. Here's the whole story." And Jake, said, "I tell Cautious everything," and which was handy for me because now as a player, I didn't have to metagame what I knew and didn't know. I just assumed I knew everything in the story up till then.
I did that on purpose. Yeah.
And so Pickles, he ends up, he sneaks, he finds a chamber with some guards, and Celestine makes a racket, and the guards come to the door. The Cautious tries to grab a guard. He gets stabbed for his troubles. 4 more guards come in, and they start playing cards. I have written down Celestine, Half-Orc, and Pickles turn into beetles, and they get stepped on and re-imprisoned. So somehow we were also turned into beetles. Pickles maybe was able to do that to us.
I guess I don't remember that part.
So anyway,
I think he was able to transform some of us into.
Yeah.
I think there was.
In any
some
case,
way.
the Serrani up the guard detail. The other guys are talking about how to pick locks and stuff. Celestine eventually, I think Rook must have picked a lock and freed Celestine. And eventually the Serrani just come in, tons of them. They haul us away, put us in a max security area. It's dark, cold, and now there's new shackles for Celestine. Pickles is put into a crate. Everyone is separated, and everyone is in the dark, alone and in the dark, in prison.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe the DM was frustrated that one of his characters could move around so much, and we were trying to escape.
That was entirely
that was that like maybe they might actually escape. Oh, I got to stop this.
Well, in truth, I was trying to orchestrate your escape, and he was trying to escape, and it was frustrating because I was trying to orchestrate it, and he was trying to orchestrate it, and I didn't like how he was going with it, and I needed to put everyone back into chains in separate. So I could orchestrate your escape the way I needed to, instead of the way that he wanted to, which was totally fine. It's definitely Alex's personality to meddle with I push every button and tried to do everything with his character, which is great. I'm so glad. I just did not anticipate him using those powers that way. Which, again, it worked fine for the story, but that was a point of frustration for me. So
I think it definitely was for him too.
It was because he wasn't able to use all of his fun toys to get everybody out.
The thing is that, some people will treat a puzzle like a static thing. They'll say, oh, the DM has put us in prison and it's our job to figure out how to get out. I have these tools at my disposal. This is how I'm going to do it. As opposed to thinking this is a story-driven thing. The DM is going to present us with a way to get out. And not everything is a static puzzle where it's like, well, we couldn't figure it out because it's time to start a new campaign.
Right.
Which is how some people, and him included, kind of treat D&D.
Right.
So whenever it's like, all right, I'm going to solve this problem, and rushing into it. So
Yeah.
I think so,
Just an
because the
aside.
idea of that, when it gets hard, let's start over. Like, that's kind of, I don't know, it's putting a lot of investment into get characters together into a place with a story and kind of driving something, and then
I
you see
I
that
have
from Alex's perspective, but I like the story-driven idea.
I have rewarded a lot of times creative problem solving and decisions you guys have made that were totally opposite of what I thought you were going to do. I have definitely rewarded that, but in that moment, he had pushed enough buttons and he had tried to manipulate enough situations to the point where I just was tired of it. I was done with it. I said, "Go to your room and don't come out until I tell you."
Which the next session, which was several weeks later, we had been in our cells for 5 days, and so, which 5 days in solitude is a lot of days in Eberron. We're losing time here, and
5 months.
the thing I have written down is Justin wants to know what we are thinking, and apparently, I don't know. That's where we started that session. You wanted to know what we were thinking. And I didn't write down what we were thinking.
No, I really did, because I wanted you guys to feel the gravity of the time lost, and I wanted you to feel sort of individually, like, what have you been thinking for 5 days in solitary confinement? Like,
Yeah.
I was trying to drive at your character sitting there totally unable to do anything and running scenarios in your head for 5 days, also understanding the time difference, and I wonder if my mom's okay. I wonder if my favorite
that little bug maneuver cost us 5 months.
It did. You put 5 months. You 5 months in the hole because of the bug maneuver. Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, that's really honestly true.
It's like
So that's why I asked you.
I don't know if anybody's seen the movie Interstellar.
Yeah.
But there's a scene that is very much like this, where it, like, there's a very real sense of loss now looking back. Like we lost a lot by this time. I have written down, alone in the dark, everything is disorienting. There is no way to tell time. We cannot see or talk to anyone. At this point, I have Joe retcons a conversation with Erexius. That's me. They talk about the Serani and how they are not the villains the 12 are making them out to be. So here's again a second wizard of the 12 giving us, the opinion that's opposite of the 12, that they need to be stopped. So eventually we are, let's see, there's nowhere to tell time, can't see or talk to anyone. Eventually we're put into a basket carried by a dragon. We have bags over our heads, but we can talk. Enceladus optimistically talks of finding dragon shards and getting home. That is very optimistic.
It is very optimistic.
Everyone agrees it's time to cooperate. Apparently, we had
enough time in the hole to figure out that it's time to cooperate.
So we are set before a giant who is bound between two figures by chains. This is the scene you were talking about earlier.
So you are taken from the prison. You are flown to a remote location that you don't know of. It's cold, obviously, out in the middle of nowhere. It's sort of this giant that's chained between two pillars in the middle of a forest grove.
And I have at this point changed the way in my journal I'm spelling Serani. How do you spell Serani?
Esurani.
Okay. And that's funny because I clearly had asked you and I wrote it double right there.
Yeah.
Okay. So Serani. A Serani plant points to a pile of our gear and points at the giant. We are clearly to kill him. Phidias attacks the bound giant. Pickles indicates he should be freed, so the Serrani guards drop the chains. Apparently the chains on us. The party unleashes on the giant. He is quickly bloodied. And Celadus rolls the Rod of Chaos, and gets an invisibility potion.
Oh, man.
And the Serrani seem afraid of his Rod of Chaos. I wrote his. I thought Celadus was a woman at this point, but
you might have. Well, I don't remember.
I may have missed a change.
Yeah, that's okay. I don't exactly. I think Wes might be able to speak to that next time he's here. I don't know.
It's fluid. So eventually, Phidias slays the giant in an icy blast. The crowd cheers mightily and surround us, load us up onto the dragon, and fly us victoriously into their town. There are young and old Serrani in the center town. Center town square. In the center is a huge arcane purple hole, bubbling with energy.
It's kind of like this huge craterous bomb hole that is simply. It's like if you look at it too long, you'll forget where you are. But it is a gaping hole of arcane energy in the center of their town. Kind of where a town square would be, or where a town fountain would be.
And like a couple things, just to be clear. So we're saying Serrani, but they look like Drow to us, right? They look a little different?
They look a little bit different. It's sort of like you know how like you see ancient Egyptian paintings or pictures, hieroglyphs of their face shape and their face structure, and it's not exactly what humans look like right now, but probably thousands of years ago they looked similar, more similar to their pictures. It's like an ancient version of a drow.
40,000-year-old drow.
Yes,
so that's what they are.
Right.
And the purple hole bubbling with energy, arcane, is it similar to the big purple arcane holes in the Mournland?
Yes.
That we get the same feeling?
Yeah, you get the same feeling that it's a rift in the ground, and what is in the rift, it's not necessarily like a pool of lava. It is arcane energy that just sort of arcs out everywhere. It's more like boiling, but there's not anything physical that's boiling. It's just arcane energy is just going nuts in this big rift in the ground.
Okay. And also to be noted, all our magic seems to be working there, except for the fire and the ice behave a little bit differently.
Right. Yeah, and that was a throwback to the Rista.
Yeah. So they take our ride to the dragon stables and lead us into an obsidian castle. They lead us to rooms with cozy beds and warm blue stones. We are led to a bath, heated, led back to our rooms, then eventually to a banquet table, laid out with a huge flying demon thing.
Yeah, it's one of those cooked screamers. It's one of these things,
screechers.
But cooked screecher on the table, and you guys are like, "Whoa, we don't know if we want to eat this."
Yeah, but it was roasted and ready to eat. So a king-like figure sits at the head of the table. He speaks, and the crowd responds like some kind of ritual, and then they start eating.
Yep.
At this point, do we see Orla again?
Not quite yet, but close.
So it seems like I have written here, this is a feast with aristocrats. There are some guards. Our neighbors don't seem to be able to communicate with us.
Right.
But we get the feeling this is a semi-casual meal. When the food is gone, they slam their hands on the table, and the king leader wants to know if we enjoyed the meal. So we're like doing some non-verbal communication, I guess.
because none of you know. Even they speak in ancient Elven. Phidias would be one of the only people that would have some level of sort of recognition of some of these words, but it's not. It's like reading Old English. You can kind of get the idea barely of what they're talking about, but then on top of that, they speak in metaphors. So there would be zero ability to understand exactly what they're saying. So
At some point, Enceladus uses the chalk that we have to draw a picture of Orla. And I have something here, but I don't know what it is. I have one of these awesome blank spaces where I'm going to write something here, but I didn't write anything there. Do you have any other notes about that day?
I don't, other than the fact that you do actually meet up with Orla. And I have one thing that I wrote about what she says when she meets you, and then I think we'll end this part of the video with this because the meeting with Orla is kind of a interesting, significant part of the story too. So, so I think you also get the idea that this is a patriarchal society or a matriarchal society, and that there are higher up women. You're ushered into sort of like a meeting room, and there are a few like really important looking, females that come in and sort of try to talk with you, and then they call for Orla, and so they leave you alone in this conference room, and Orla comes in and says, "Oh my goodness, I'm so glad, it's so glad to see you," and she looks drastically different. And so she is wearing their clothes. She has black eye makeup. Her hair is different, and she has this silver collar around her neck. And her eyes look really different too. Like she doesn't look like normal Orla eyes. She looks very affected by this collar around her neck. But what she says is, she says, "Okay, I know we've been apart for only a few days, 6 to be exact, but in that time I have learned a ton." And she says, "Because I can speak ancient Elven and Giant, they absolutely love me here." She said they gave me access to all of their old manuscripts, and she says, "I mean, they're old. It isn't," or she says, "I mean, old to them isn't as old as we think. They have only been here for 1,392 years and 9 months. Yet they have been missing from Eberron, for over 39,000 years. Isn't that wild? By the way, that dinner you had last night, the whole thing was staged. All of the Serrani involved were acting. There were way more, mostly high-ranking women behind the curtains between the columns on the second level, watching and listening. I would have figured you would have figured it out," pointing to Phidias. "These are drow from millennia ago. True, but they've always been matriarchal. There was a man at the head of the table directing things. Didn't you feel a little weird? Oh yeah, they dressed me up like this. I look good in black eye makeup, don't I?" And she says, "It's like two holes of infinity where my eyes used to be," and you guys kind of get this creeped out. She just looks really goth. Like she looks very, very goth. But she says this dress is made of a wood fiber. Crazy, right? And it's amazingly comfortable. And so she sort of goes on to describe that this wood is coming from those living trees that you guys you found, they recovered the seed for and grew, and that grow all around here, and they can make this cool like wood fiber weave that actually protects you against the elements, and you end up getting some of those undergarments with the new clothing that they gave you after you take your bath. So you already know about the wood weave and the cold elemental protection that it gives you. But he says, "Right, this. Well," and she sort of points to the collar. It says, "Well, the collar is to keep me on task. It seems to enhance my dragon mark, but the side effects are brutal. Can't use any of my arcane magic. It's like a focusing lens for my new language gifts. I'm hearing and understanding things that I never knew existed. did you know stones speak to each other? She says, yeah, and snowflakes do too. It's a serious trip. Not sure if I even want my bard powers back. Phidias, I don't know you very well, but I have a question. I can't believe I don't remember, but what is your mother's clan name? And so Phidias at that point answers Mazarak. And she says, of course, that makes so much sense. Okay, so I have a story for you that might be something we can use in our favor to win over the trust of these people. Here goes. From what I've read, she gives you the history of the giants, the dragons, the Serani, and Solitude, just like you got a little bit from Laren, you know, the whatever the guy's name was in the prison.
Orexius.
And then she says, okay, so according to their history, 79 drow, one missing. That in mind, it is Milimu Mazaract. She says she is considered the lost god, the one who would return to bring everyone back to Eberron. And so she gets super excited about this story and how she tells of the event that brought the Serani to Solitude and how it was during the Elven Rebellion at the end of the Giants and how they had gone crazy with dragon magic and they had opened portals and there was a giant war and then a civil war on top of that with the elves revolting. But before then, a portal opened up and a workforce of drow that were that had overseers that were giants and visiting dragons had all been sucked into this portal, inadvertently sucked into the portal of Solitude, and that's how those were the progenitors of everyone living in Solitude at this point. And the drow, the 79 drow, with one missing, which was Phidias's great grandmother. That's how the story went, and she uncovered that in the heritage and the literature that the Serani allowed her to read.
And did you say she was the one that was going to return?
Yes. The Mazaract was going to return.
The Mazarac.
There's more than one Mazarac.
Right. There is more than one Mazarac. Yeah.
I have one sister.
You have a sister. Gers knows that.
Left behind. And a mother.
Right. Right. So so Orla basically kind of says, hey, like, cool, huh? Like, shake you. And she still has that cheerleader feel of being really excited about things, but she has black eyes and black eyeliner and really weird wooden clothing and a silver necklace. And she is talking about not ever being a bard ever again. So she is in the process of a transformation that you guys are experiencing the beginnings of and are sort of weirded out, but also blown away by this history that you're getting of the Serani, and you're being brought fully up to speed to who they think they are and where they think they came from.
How many of them are there? Did we notice?
No, you saw a lot. I mean, there were
more than 80. There's like
for sure more than 80. Yeah.
Hundreds or thousands.
Hundreds of them. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I don't think you ever saw thousands, but you saw several hundreds of them at any one. Yeah. Right.
Well, so that is cool. I really appreciate the hearing the text or the what Orla said. That's really important for the recap, because some of this stuff we had heard years ago, but it's good to recap.
It totally is. Yeah. I feel like it was a way for me to share important bits of info with you guys, and that's why I wrote it down. Everything else was sort of you directed, but then there were certain tidbits that I needed to be spoken. So
that was 1 year, almost exactly 1 year is what our recap was. That was 2018. We started in January 2018, and now we're in January 2019.
Yep.
In Solitude.
Yeah, and there is still a ton of story left to tell over the last year and a half in that case. So we have characters to introduce. We have things to tie up. We have people to meet. We have places to go.
That's right. Love to hear what you think of it so far. Let us know in the comments or during our live Twitch stream, which we'll post a schedule of.
Mhm.
Thanks for watching.
Thanks for listening. And catch us on the next one.